Welcome to Let There Be Dark, a virtual celebration of the night as the source of light. Wherever you are, you might want to dim the lights or turn them off altogether to help you get in a dark state of mind. So the purpose of this event is to celebrate our personal, cultural, ecological, and spiritual connection to darkness and night skies, as well as to advance the conversation around overturning the prohibition on dark sky preserves in the Upper Peninsula. First, we'll have presentations from our panelists to establish the value of darkness. That value could be cultural, ecological, spiritual, personal, or even economic. Next, we'll discuss the prohibition on the dark sky preserves in the Upper Peninsula, followed by audience participation. Before we go further, I'd like to invite everyone to sign our petition on ending the UP Dark Sky Preserve prohibition. The URL is change.org/therightTonight. Signing will also ensure that you receive email updates regarding future events and actions. You can also learn more by going protecttheporkies.com and clicking Other Initiatives, then The Right Tonight. That will take you to a page where today's video will be posted, and you'll also find a link to the online petition and some paper petitions for UP residents specifically. We encourage the paper petitions as much as possible. They look like this, nothing fancy, but you can sign on your friends and family and have it available at public events. All right, on with the show. Tonight's panelists are Aimee Cree Dunn, Professor of Native American Studies at Northern Michigan University, Robyn Porteen, Chapter Lead of Dark Sky Michigan, Kathleen Heidemann of Save the Wild UP, Cynthia Hector Johnson of the Beaver Island State Wildlife Research Area, Robert Parrish from Lawless Dark Sky Park, downstate in Cass County, Brad Barnett, Executive Director, and Tom Grotewohl of Protect the Porkies, which is me. So since I'm already talking, I'm going to get my presentation rolling first. Here we go. So in the beginning, there was Google. When you type the word darkness into Google image search, this is what you get, all on the first page. Staircases going to the basement, evil entities, creepy children standing in the middle of a field for no apparent reason. This is a glimpse into our collective unconscious. We've all got dark associations with the word darkness, and not just from horror movies. All world religions use darkness as a metaphor for very dark things, from the empty chaos that reigned before order, for evil, for sin and ignorance, for delusion. These dark connotations for darkness have infiltrated our very language, like when we say it was a dark time in my life. Nothing is darker than the Dark Ages, an era popularly associated with pestilence, famine, and superstition. Fortunately, Europe finally reached the Enlightenment, aka the modern scientific era, where well-nourished aristocrats gaze into the luminous glow of whatever it is they're gazing at there. As we see, the scientific and religious metaphors agree, light good, dark bad. And when science and religion agree on something, you know the roots go deep. What may seem like an intellectual point has implications for the natural world. In popular fairy tales like Little Red Riding Hood and Hansel and Gretel, the dark forest is a forbidden realm where evil entities plan to do us harm. From the perspective of civilization, the dark forest is like the tangled chaos before God's light, requiring man to step in and order it in a series of rectangles. Of course, for ancient people, and for those living in wilder places today, the darkness can be a source of danger. Sitting around the fire, some of the stories we told and continue to tell are understandably about the monsters lurking just beyond the edge of light. But when we keep the light on, and not just all the time, but on everywhere, it isn't only the monsters who go hungry. Other life forms don't know anything about our stories or clever metaphors. They're just trying to get by. Most mammals, amphibians, and insects are nocturnal, as well as a large percentage of birds, reptiles, and fish. This means that the onset of darkness is necessary for their courtship, mating, territoriality, predation, foraging, communication, migration, metabolism, and more. For example, many species of frogs will not form night choruses if the sky is too bright. And if they don't sing, they don't mate. Now, the word nocturnal is really a flattening of the complexity. The category of nocturnal includes crepuscular life forms, who are most active at dusk and dawn, and it includes the whole gradient of darkness, which changes according to the weather and the lunar cycle. We have many nights within a single night and within a month, and that shifting darkness creates different temporal niches, each occupied by unique inhabitants. This is why some species of fireflies come out around dusk while others come out much later, though all of them require darkness to see each other's flashing patterns. A full moon benefits predators who can more easily spot their prey, whereas a new moon benefits the prey, which can more easily hide. It's on these boring new moon nights when coyotes most frequently take to howling, and the critters they hunt get a much needed break. So as you can see, the gradient of moonlight, starlight, and shadow gives rise to biodiversity and dynamic relationships between species. Unfortunately, the same as industrial civilization has paved over physical space, turning biodiverse forests like this one into a green or gray desert, it is also paving over time. The bleaching of the night by reducing the difference between dusk and midnight, between full moon and new moon, steamrolls over all those niches that life forms have evolved billions of years to inhabit. For a firefly, flashing next to a streetlight is like trying to have a conversation at a noisy construction site. Not ideal for dropping a pickup line. The paving of the night also has consequences for humans. Henry David Thoreau compared wild nature to a poem, but one from which previous generations had torn out many of the finest passages. He says, "I should not like to think that some demigod had come before me and picked out all the best stars. I wish to know an entire heaven and an entire earth." He wrote those words over 170 years ago, so how must people today be feeling? All of the hormones in our bodies dance to the circadian rhythm of our biological clocks. Darkness triggers the production of melatonin. In fact, all animals, all plants, all fungi, and all bacteria produce melatonin. That's how fundamental the night is. But artificial lighting disrupts the production of many other hormones too, leptin, nocturnin, all of which regulate biological health. Turning off the light outside our homes is a great first step, but since light can travel over 200 miles via water vapor, light pollution requires not just a personal, but a civilization-wide response. This map shows the spread of light pollution over the last 70 years. Though some places hold out longer than others, nowhere is immune, not even the Upper Peninsula. Especially in and around metropolitan areas, it's not as dark as it once was, but it's far darker than it will be unless steps are taken. The first of those steps is reclaiming the narrative. Fortunately, our popular culture is more diverse than I gave it credit for earlier. Of those classic European fairy tales, we have two kinds. Morality tales, in which the forest is a place for children to get gobbled up, and tales of wonder, where the forest is a place of discovery. Cultures around the world have also developed symbols, worldviews, and mythologies in which the darkness and the light are not enemies, but complementary opposites. As the yin-yang shows, the dark is in the light and the light is in the dark. The sun makes shadows, and when you have enough shadows, the stars come out. And although our world religions are not the biggest fans of darkness, they all love the moon and the stars. If that isn't confusing enough, consider that in Buddhism, the highest state of enlightenment is nirvana, which translates as blowing out the candle. So enlightenment is a blown out candle. That's a real head scratcher. This is all summed up by the ancient alchemical phrase, as above, so below. What happens in the heavens is a mirror to life on the ground as well as life within us. But to end on an even more profound note, always remember, long before the earliest human sailors, dung beetles have been navigating using the light of the Milky Way. Thank you very much. And with that, I will pass the mic over to Aimee Cree Dunn.
Thank you, Tom. That was a wonderful presentation. I'm so happy to hear somebody talking about the words in our in the English language and how darkness ties into that, because a lot of people, you hear it all the time, even among people who pride themselves on their vocabulary. It's always dark if it's something horrible. And I'm like, think of a synonym. There are many other ways. So that's wonderful. So many, our culture really can tie us into how we start to perceive and view things that are out there. So that's great. Thank you so much for that. Let me get my slideshow going here. So tonight, Tom asked me if I would speak on traditional star knowledge. And I'm just going to touch on, there's so much, of course, we could go into, so I'm going to try to really limit myself because we got so many great people to speak on so many things. But there are a couple of things I want to take a look at, particularly with the Sami and the Anishinaabe, that tie right directly to our land. I thought I'd try to look for some, of course, Anishinaabe, this being the land of the Anishinaabe, and Sami, a lot of people from Scandinavia immigrated over to this area. So I thought some people might be interested in that as well. So interestingly, our star knowledge, our traditional star knowledge, really often are stories of the rivers, land, and seas, right? They're about life lived on the land, but reflecting it up in the stars. And so I thought that was it's an interesting thing to think about. Before I get into that, though, I wanted to just mention, most of us are probably familiar with the constellations in the night sky, as things like Orion, Cassiopeia, Ursa Major, the Big Dipper. And these constellations came about officially in the 1920s when the International Astronomical Union said, we shall now make official these constellations in the sky. And they named them after Mesopotamian, Greek, and some Roman constellations. Even the southern constellations, as I understand it, though, of course, no Mesopotamian, Greek, or Roman people were naming constellations down in the southern hemisphere. They related it all back to that culture. And of course, there are hundreds, probably thousands of other cultural traditions, and particularly throughout human history, that have looked at the night sky and seen things in a very different way. So it was a very Western centric, a very I would say, presumptive attempt to order the night sky and make it a standardized night sky, all from this one cultural perspective, this one type of cultural stories. And it might be why, when you look up at the night sky and you remember there's interesting stories, you know, Perseus and Pegasus and Cassiopeia and the sea monster and all, how all those stories tie together, but they don't really tie you into the land that you live on. So they're like these cultural stories that are up there, kind of interesting, but how does that relate to you personally? So let's take a look at some, as we go through this, that will bring us right into stars as stories lived on the land. One of the first ones I want to talk about is the human heritage, that our star knowledge in the skies, the stories that we tell about the stars in the sky at night, go back for so long. You can go to Aboriginal Australia and there are, you know, what they call moon calendars that are built on the ground of people like 40,000 years ago who have been using those places to have to do with moon calendars. You can look at the Celts. The Celts use their calendars. A lot of people think their stone circles were built on the solar calendar, but that a lot of people say now it was an interpretation of the Romans came, but it was actually a lunar calendar. And of course, we have this idea of sitting around campfires or just sitting outside in the dark and looking at the stars and making up these stories. And we do that sometimes just for fun, but a lot of times those stories, as we look at cultural traditions, actually teach us lessons that can be very important, both to our lives or about learning about the land that we live on or other sorts of things. I'll let them speak for themselves as we go through this real quick overview. Sami star knowledge. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Sami, they are a tribal people in Northern Europe. They are very much around today and practicing, trying to keep the culture alive and revitalizing the culture. Reindeer herders now, hunter-gatherers in the past until colonization kind of forced more sedentary lifestyle, you know, making it difficult to be hunter-gatherers. So they became sort of partial farmers, livestock raisers by following the reindeer around. As reindeer herders, they have developed a certain sort of star knowledge that ties into that. And I have this turning here, and I'm sorry that the words are very not clear, but I'll explain what they are. the whole entire night sky, as I was looking at, and again, I'm no expert on this. This is something I just picked up. I'm like, I want to learn about the Sami knowledge and share this. So I'm not, don't look to me to kind of explain all the in-depth thing of this, but the whole night sky is like moving. It's like a story. The movement of the night sky is a story. And it's about Favna. Maybe somebody who can speak Finnish or Sami can correct my pronunciations. Favna the hunter, who's on one side of the what we could call the North Star, what we often know as the North Star. He's on one side, and he is hunting Sarvis, the reindeer, who's on the other side of the North Star. If you look at the Big Dipper, what we see is the Big Dipper and the handle, that's his bow. You know, and in some stories I saw that that the hunter was referred to as a woman, so that's interesting too. That sometimes we have that woman, some stories be a woman huntress in the sky, and other times it's a man who's hunting in the sky. But the point being, the story is they chase each other around this moving sky, and there are all these other constellations that set in there. Like there's an old woman, it's what's just called like the old woman and her pack of dogs, and she's coming with the pot for when the hunter shoots the reindeer. And there's all these three brothers that are also. But the key point of this is what we often know of as the North Star is called the sky nail or the sky support. It's what holds up the sky. And if the hunter were to take that shot at Sarvis, the reindeer, or Sarvis, the elk, kind of different interpretations, he or she would end up hitting that sky support, would end up hitting that sky nail, and thus would destroy everything. The whole world would collapse. So there's a really interesting moral lesson there, I think, that idea that, of course, it's a celebration of the hunt and a celebration of the hunter and an honoring of the reindeer and the elk. But also there's this moral lesson that you don't just take every shot you got to think about the whole fabric of life when you're out there hunting. There's a whole lesson in this idea that hunting isn't just about being able to kill what you want. You got to be mindful and thoughtful about it. And that I found a very interesting aspect of the star knowledge. It's not just a story. It actually has a lesson to teach. So like I said, I chose Sami because there's a number of people who may have some cultural connection up here in the North Woods with the Sami, and I felt it was only right to honor that strong cultural knowledge up here. But of course, our cultural knowledge here in the Upper Peninsula is really rooted back generations in the Anishinaabe star knowledge. So I want to spend time on a couple of key constellations that are in the sky right now. This comes a lot, if anybody's interested, from Carl Gawboy. His last name is Gawboy, and he and a geologist, Ron Morton, co-wrote a book together called Talking Sky, and there's a lot of great stories in there. And once you get started on that, there'll be other references and sources you can use to learn ever more. But with this Anishinaabe star knowledge right now, if you were to look in the sky, some of you may already recognize what this constellation is often referred to in Western culture, and that's Orion. Orion, for many Anishinaabe people, is also known as the Winter Maker. Some people will refer to him as Nanabuju. Carl Gawboy talks about him being the Winter Maker. And what's interesting right now, if you take a look, I'll put this up here, those of you who are familiar with the star names, the Winter Maker has a broader spread than just Orion. In fact, his grasp goes across the whole sky. His arms stretch across the whole sky, kind of symbolizing how long winter can last. And this is about the time Carl Gawboy talks about when Anishinaabe parents, 500, 1,000 years ago, would be telling their young ones, you know what, get those blunt tip arrows out in that little bow I made you. Let's go shoot the Winter Maker out of the sky. Because it's time that he moved on, getting to be about that time of the winter. It's just going on and on. This constellation that comes after the Winter Maker, and it's already right now rising in the sky, is Mishibaju, or the curly tail, the water panther, the great panther. And in Western constellations, a lot of people would know this as Leo. And Leo kind of takes where the tail of Mishibaju is as kind of the head of where Leo is, and Leo heads off over to the left there. But Mishibaju is the water panther. You will find pictographs of this constellation in different places around Anishinaabe, around the land of the Anishinaabe, UP, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Canada. And Mishibaju, as the water panther, represents that time of the year when the water is starting to be released, right? The snow is melting, the ice is melting on the rivers. And the lesson that goes with this constellation is when you start to see Mishibaju in the sky, that means it's really time to start paying attention to your waterways, maybe moving away from areas that are going to flood. Just kind of a warning of the powers of the water are coming into full strength at this time of the year. There's some names of the stars for those of you who pay attention to the more specific names so you can locate them in the sky. And finally, like I said, we don't have a lot of time to just keep going on, but again, I'd recommend like Talking Sky, Carl Galboy, and from there you'll be learning more. Just wanted to mention that even though these constellations, these star stories that tell us both, of human history and of other cultures, and also of our place on a particular land, like where we are today with Anishinaabe land and Anishinaabe stories, this is human heritage that we've had for thousands and thousands of years, yet 1/3 of humanity cannot see, the light pollution is so bad, 1/3 of humanity can't see things like the Milky Way. 80% of Americans can't see the Milky Way. There's a new atlas from National Geographic here that talks about how 80% of the planet's land areas and 99% of the population of the United States and Europe live under skies so blotted with man-made light, the Milky Way has become virtually invisible. 99% of the population in the US and Europe. So here in the UP, we're part of that 1% that still has skies dark enough that we can see the Milky Way. And the fact that they would actually prohibit that protection of it through things like dark sky parks, through this legislation that we're going to be taking a look at today, is absolutely astounding to me. And finally, I hesitate a little bit with this next slide because I'm not sure what my audience is here, but I think it's really important to emphasize as we're talking about things like dark sky parks and things. I love dark sky parks. I think they're a great idea, but they can come across to different people in different ways, in particular in our hugely politically divided climate. People may forget that we all can come together on this idea of having dark skies, particularly here in the rural UP. Dark skies are a rural heritage. And just as one example, something people may not think of, in a conversation many years ago with a Chatham dairy farmer, where we were talking about how annoyed we were at yard lights that would come out and destroy your night sky view. She said, yeah, and that's what BB guns are for, right? So we think as we're moving us, again, this is not advocating that people go out and take BB guns and shoot yard lights, but just I wanted to put it out there that we're in such a climate where we see ourselves so divided that we have to remember how we speak, how we present things. We really need to be trying to build those bridges and try to understand that there can be such a divide when we're talking about land-based issues, right? That it's the city liberals who want to stop rural conservatives from doing what they want to do with their land, and we get this huge conflict when really we have this common ground to build on and this common place to be at and this common love. And if we could really just remember that we are coming together and really trying to understand each other, even as our other maybe cultural issues get in the way, to kind of try to find that common ground, that is something I feel is so imperative if we're going to really be able to protect things like these dark skies that are so rare today. That's it for me. I appreciate the time, and I hope I didn't take too long. Miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech, Aimee, that was wonderful. And I'm excited to explore later on when we get into the UP dark sky prohibition, how we can use this issue as a unifying force in the political climate of today, because I agree, I think this is something we can all get behind. All right, so our next presenter is Robyn Porteen, who is the chapter lead of Dark Sky Michigan. Take it away, Robyn.
All right, hello everybody. Let me get my screen share on here. Okay, so this isn't really a presentation. This is just more of an introduction of the chapter. So Dark Sky Michigan is the official chapter of Dark Sky International, which used to be called International Dark Sky Association. So we are the kind of the voice here for them, and we help residents and businesses and people around the state with education on light pollution and solutions. So the chapter was founded in 2022. And I've been a delegate of Dark Sky International since 2019. I do a lot of camping, night sky photography. I'm all over the state, and I always have a focus on going where it's dark. And I realized there are a lot of conservation projects, people interested in preserving the night skies, a lot of people doing things about it, but nobody knew about each other. So we didn't have a chapter here in Michigan, so I decided to go ahead and make that happen. And we're also a part of the global network of dark sky chapters. So if, we talk with people, residents that have lighting issues. We talk with townships about having lighting ordinances. We educate businesses and the general public on solutions to help reduce light pollution. And we've got some really good partners, friends, collaborators. Our board members are all over the state, from the UP down to the southern part of Michigan. And we have volunteers. So we speak at events across the state, and we are here to network everybody. So kind of the hub for if you need to find somebody that maybe knows about sports arena lighting and you want to learn how to, make that darker or better for the community, we can hook you up with a lighting company that specializes in that. If you have issues that other chapters around the country or even worldwide have already addressed, we have that as a resource as well. So we can, we've been at the table with the ski resort here in Michigan, and I was able to reach out to a chapter in Colorado that had dealt with ski resort lighting. So we're here to help and network people together. And that puts us on, the worldwide effort. I just want to say that Dark Sky International, we have dark sky places all over the world. So there are now over 160,000 kilometers of protected land in 22 countries on 6 continents. We do have bipartisan efforts where they endorsed the Dark and Quiet Skies Act. It was a bill championed by a couple of senators from both sides of the aisle. They're working on that, and that has to do with the satellites too. So for quiet skies, that's another issue we're having with our night skies. So you can see some of the partners here that we have on the international level. So that's pretty much all I have. And just letting you know we are here. Our website is darkskymichigan.org, and we have a Facebook group, Dark Sky Michigan, where we try to keep everybody up to date on what's going on with local and our national efforts.
Thank you so much, Robyn. And thank you for the work that your organization is doing.
Welcome.
So up next, we've got Kathleen Heidemann. And in the beginning, I said Kathleen is from Save the Wild UP, which is one of my favorite websites and how I learned a lot about the Upper Peninsula. But of course, a handful of years ago, Save the Wild UP actually merged into the Upper Peninsula Environmental Coalition. So that should be a more accurate description of Kathleen's position. But Kathleen, are you with us right now? Awesome. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
And I believe I'm showing a slide. Play. Oop. Oop. Let me just. Can everyone see that?
Yellow Dog Plains, Marquette County.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. So on behalf of a small group of environmentalists who have been paying attention to eagle mine out on the Yellow Dog Plains in the middle of Marquette County, I have been interested in the question of light pollution out there from the beginning. My father-in-law, Fred Reedholm, had this idea that it would change northern Marquette County like a bomb going off out there. And one of the things from the very beginning that he said to watch out for was the light pollution, because this is one of those magic dark spots on the map, right, where there's not any light pollution out there. And so I started paying attention, and I got very excited when I found that these imaging databases go back to the 90s. And so this is an image with light data from 1992. And it's showing the closest, if everyone can see my cursor moving on the screen kind of out here, this is the area that has eagle mine. now. In northern Marquette County, you can see this beautiful big black blob of darkness out there. And so over time, this is Big Bay, and you can see Marquette and Ishpeming. Here is Lance, spreading around the edge to Baraga. Here we're at 2005. There's still no darkness interrupted out in the middle of Marquette County. This is kind of the boundary line out here is actually Baraga County as well. So it's northern Marquette and western northwestern Baraga. And so what changes is in 2008, this blob is actually mineral exploration that's taking place out on the Yellow Dog Plains, closer to the Baraga line in 2008, Rio Tinto and Kennecott. And you wouldn't think that you could track, mineral exploration, but they do it all night. They're working 24/7 when they're doing mineral drilling areas. And so it's kind of, some of these spots are lit up like little football fields out in the woods, and then here is Eagle Mine. It appears on the map in 2010. And so you can see it's just this sort of vague blue blob born out there with a faint greenish in the middle, which is kind of where the most activity was. And then, so that's 2010 at the mine site. Here is 2011. You can see two big blobs. And so the blob, as blobs do, divides itself through cell mutation, I guess. And so the second one is Eagle Mine developed a truck maintenance facility out on the Yellow Dog Plains, closer to the road to Pinnacle Falls, if people are familiar with that. So now there are two light sources out there. And you can see the main one for Eagle Mine has grown. And so now in 2013, you can see the blobs have converged to cover most of the Yellow Dog Plains. They're bluish and green. Here you see the blob goes to yellow in 2014. And we are jumping satellites, which, I'm not a satellite expert, so I don't really understand the difference. I know that, some of the radiance calibrations are more sensitive as time goes on, but here is Eagle Mine, and, you can see this kind of big tail that the blob has. And so you're seeing intensity and you're seeing expansion still. And that's 2014 was the year the mine was commissioned. Here's 2016. You can see it growing further from green and yellow to now include a spot of orange-red in the middle. The spot of orange-red is the greater intensity. Like you can see orange and red in Marquette. Here is the blob has spread to really clearly show the direction of the truck traffic out there, because by now they're not just pulling out ore, they're also bringing up aggregate from local quarries and sand and cement to mix with their backfill so that they can dump that underground in the mine. And so just a lot more truck traffic, I think, explains that. In this image, this is 2022, and I would note that the entire map has changed a bit. And this is still the same, VIIR satellite, but it's maybe greater sensitivity. But what I'm learning is also that the radiance changes across North America are increasing in the amount of that kind of bypass scatter glow that is, contaminating a little bit everywhere. And so this shows kind of the background level of light in the area. And then here is a close-up. You can see, just in case anybody was questioning whether, is that really Eagle Mine out there? Here is the mine site. I type Eagle Mine into the browser. This is for 2020. You can clearly see it's focused on Eagle Mine, and the trucks going in and out is the most intense area right around the rock, which is where the trucks come in and out. And so then, and to this point, this is still the only source of light pollution in northern Marquette County. And Here is the trend line that the satellite systems allow you to consider. So you can do pixel analysis, and you drop a point on the map. I dropped down the point for Eagle Mine. It shows me the trend analysis. It shows me these background levels. Then you see this is the last year that you have a mark here, and then now you're up here way off the chart. And so this is when the mine is going into production, as they're getting, you know, the truck site and the mine developed. And then here is a view from space at a scale that you can see, you know, 3/4 of the United States. And you can still make out the dot for Eagle Mine in this map, because the surrounding area is so distinct that it is a visible point of light at this greatly zoomed out scale. Eagle Mine has claimed that they have minimized their light pollution. I mean, not recently, we've been pointing it out for, you know, like 7 years, and that they say that their mining activities on the Yellow Dog Plains produce only as much light pollution equivalent to a small gas station, which is not true. And then I'll just share these two. This is the new updated Lorenz Astronomy, the Light Pollution Atlas, which shows the image kind of differently. But what you can see is, see that gray area? So now the true black darkness is receding out over Lake Superior, and you have grays around northern Marquette County. It's not truly black on this map. The top part of Marquette County is in the gray. And then you can see the light blob for Eagle Mine has merged to that blue area that is considered, you know, the light blob of inner Marquette County, the Marquette, Ishpeming, Negaunee, and all the way down to the airport. And then I zoom in on Marquette and Ishpeming here to show you it's not just Ishpeming and Negaunee. Here's another mine down here. This is the Tilden mine, and that is almost as significant as Marquette, just because, you know, that's a lot of ambient light pollution down there. Anybody driving by who looks at it can see, you know, to the south that it's much more bright than just Ishpeming is. But that is a good illustration of it. Here is Marquette zoomed in. And just because, you know, here it makes sense that this side is lit up red because of the highway. It extends off this way. But down here, this is the ski hill and this is the prison. And they also contribute a great deal of sort of scatter spray light pollution at night. And the interesting statistic that I saw was I was preparing for an air permit hearing earlier tonight, and it was talking about how at night there are particles called nitrate radicals that form in our atmosphere that help. They only form at night in the atmosphere, and they help cleanse the sky. They cleanse the sky of air quality problems, and it's our natural air scrubber, basically, and that light pollution interferes with the formation of nitrate radicals. So there is a connection between the air quality and the light quality, or the darkness quality, we'll say. So that's what I had to share tonight. I will add just these 2 slides in case anybody is interested in finding out more. This is a project that was done by students at Calumet High School up in the Keweenaw, and they put together a beautiful hand-drawn and illustrated description of light pollution impacts, and it's really well done. Clearly a labor of love, and there's a link to that can be made available in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathleen. That was a very interesting example of how light pollution spreads. And my personal hope is that when we start talking about dark sky preserves, that's really just the start of a larger conversation about dark skies awareness, in which enterprises, operations like Eagle Mine, like a gas station, might just consider using downward facing lights or shielded lights. It wouldn't stop the operation, but it would help the rest of us to enjoy the night sky. So with that, we're going to head on to Cynthia Johnson from the Beaver Island State Wildlife Research Area. I hope I'm getting all those words in the right order. And I believe the Beaver Island was the Michigan's first international dark sky sanctuary. So take
That
it away.
is correct. Thank you. So happy to be here and really just so thrilled and confused, but just fabulous information. It used to be you didn't get this kind of good information. It wasn't out there when we started 5 years ago to become a sanctuary. So I'm very thrilled to see all the information. And I had a couple of things to that entered my mind sparked by these kind of presentations. And that's why these kind of presentations are so valuable. You get to hear what everyone else is doing and what's going on. And there's so much out there that is invaluable to the worldwide cause and what Dark Sky International is doing. But perhaps my voice can be the one to tell you that I live in a Bortle 2 sky. I don't know how many people are familiar with that Bortle scale in the room. I know several of them are. But one thing that is very important is to get these things right as to what your Bortle scale is and what you are calling yourself. So we are a sanctuary. I want to point out, though, thank you for Kathleen's map. I hope all of you could not see Beaver Island on that light pollution info map. And you'll have to zoom in really close to see us because that shows light pollution and we have hardly any, very little. We still are at a Bortle class 2. You guys are a Bortle class 2. The beauty of that and us is you are looking into a Bortle class 1, which are the darkest skies in the world and really enhances that viewing process. But also to get the naming right, first of all, we're talking about the lack of dark sky preserves in the Upper Peninsula. There are 6 preserves in the state of Michigan, legislated officially by the state of Michigan, which has a little bit, but not entirely to do with Dark Sky International and their ability as a worldwide organization to grant these titles of they used to have preserves. There's still a few out there worldwide. Doesn't mean the same thing as what the Act 451 state of Michigan terms as a preserve. We are a sanctuary, which is one of the highest levels, and you have to have a lot of qualifiers to get there to be a sanctuary. And by the way, Tom, all the words are, and we didn't like this very much either, but this is the way it turned out. Beaver Island State Wildlife Research Area International Dark Sky Sanctuary. And Dark Sky International, we had to have all that in there. We didn't understand it at the time, but now we do. It's because it is very specific and we are not a park. And when you just randomly talk about parks and establishing parks, it's a whole different ball game from a sanctuary or a preserve. In our sanctuary in particular, we have no lights. We have 9,432 some acres with 0 lights. So it's a huge difference. A park will have lights, an urban community will have lights, but what makes the difference there is how they're regulated and what the policies are. After 5 years of hard work, there's a couple of things that I just want to point out that were crucial, very, very crucial. One was Annette S. Lee, when she talked about in the 2021 Under One Sky International Dark Sky Conference, and she talked about Indigenous star knowledge. One of the things is that if you go back to Australia, these star stories aren't just star stories. These are what the Aboriginals and many Native Americans, many Indigenous peoples recognize as the story of their lives. They are the stars. It's their history. So when you're destroying the stars with light pollution, you're destroying their life story. That really struck me. Now I've lost the second point thanks to heart medication, medications, but what I've really learned from Dark Sky International is Dark Sky International is there to do everything for you. Oh, we relied on those people. And one of the big surprises that came out of our dedication ceremony back in September, where Robert contributed, Robyn was there, Dark Sky, Headlands Dark Sky Park, Adler Planetarium. What we didn't realize, and what still gives me goosebumps to this day, what I never even thought about, is when people from other parks and other areas came and showed their appreciation and thanked us for the good work we were doing. That was very moving, and that is what is out there internationally. So what came to me very strongly at that point is that the best thing I can ever do when talking on a panel like this or anywhere else is to point out Dark Sky International, darksky.org. They're doing it all. They've been around since 1988. They can help you do anything and almost every piece of information you need to move forward, whether it be to protect the Porkies, to establish some kind of dark sky place in the Porkies. That's where you're going to start. And believe me, the help is right there. That's darksky.org. I apologize for not having fancy presentations. I just hope that my passion will shine through as to what we've accomplished in 5 years and how beautiful it is. As until you get people out there and you can go, like I can, a mile up the road and stand on the edge of the world of Lake Michigan in the Beaver Island archipelago, and I can see Sault Ste. Marie. I can see the light glow from Charlevoix, Petoskey, Escanaba, Newberry. It shows up in my photographs of the Northern Lights, and it's there. And I know for a fact, you can't see us, because we are protected. We are protecting the wildlife, the humans, the animals, the dark sky knowledge, the cultural places, and all of that enters into this, which you've heard from other speakers, and you'll hear from a few more speakers here. One other thing, I'd just like to give you darkskyisland.org. That's our Beaver Island website. Beaver Island Dark Sky Project on Facebook. Beaver Island State Wildlife Research Area with that long title, also on Facebook. And you can listen to our programming on WVBI.net, 91.9, on the airwaves, possibly somewhere places on the mainland. You'll hear that now to an increase in power. And our Dark Sky Community Calendar listing events, because those are the major things that we do to create awareness, because we are so remote and because we don't have any lights, and because we've been able to establish this amazing sanctuary in the state of Michigan. And I wish you all good luck. And that's really about all I do want to say.
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia. And
You are
as
welcome.
you stated, Dark Sky International is an amazing resource. We're going to see a bit later on why a place like Porcupine Mountain State Park, however, cannot be declared an international dark sky park, which is why this prohibition on dark sky preserves on state lands in Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula, is potentially very harmful, and that's what we're trying to change. So now we're going to hear from Robert Parrish, who established the DK Lawless International Dark Sky Park down in Cass County. Take it away, Robert.
Thank you, Tom. It's an honor to be invited to this forum tonight. I'm a nerd. There's no doubt about that. According to my wife, I was born a nerd and have been losing ground ever since. But I spent the first part of my life when I was small in Virginia, because my father was in the United States Navy. He was a regular enlisted man. But he was on an aircraft carrier in the early 1950s. And there was a naval aviator in the Navy. You had to be specific. That's not a pilot. They're aviators, because my dad would correct me, who would take people out at night, those who wanted to learn, and teach them the stars, because back in those days, pilots had to navigate at night by the stars. And when we eventually, after many years, moved back to Michigan, my dad taught me the stars from our backyard. And I grew up in a very small town of about 1,500 people, a small town called Cassopolis, Michigan. And when I was small, the Milky Way would arch across the sky. It was impossible not to see it. But between my father and the space race of the 1960s and the fact that when I was 6 or 7 years old, maybe 8, Santa Claus brought me a telescope for Christmas, and I've been hooked ever since. And I lost my father about 5 years ago, and I thought one of the great ways to immortalize his name, so to speak, was to take Dr. Lawless County Park and try to make it a dark sky park. And after 3.5 years and a lot of fussing and cussing and trying to get the application right, about 3 days after Christmas, I received an email saying that we had made it, and I cried my eyes out like a little baby because of my dad. My dad was the greatest dad any kid could ever hope for, and I did it in his honor. And so when I'm sitting out there at night looking at the stars, I can feel his presence sitting right next to me. And I'm a firm believer that Mother Nature does not have to lose its beauty with the setting sun. It can be even more beautiful at night. And the one thing about the night sky that I think brings everybody together is the fact that no matter what you believe, if you're a religious person or if you're not a religious person, there's no getting around the fact that we're all made of star stuff. That's a scientific fact. And being able to see the stars allows us to look into our past and share that commonality. And I know that in this day and age, there's a lot of division in the United States. But I think advocating for dark skies has something to offer for both sides of the aisle. From a capitalistic perspective, dark sky tourism is on the rise, not only nationally, but here in Michigan too. As a matter of fact, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation came out with a paper, I'd say 5, 6 years ago, touting astrotourism, and Michigan was in a good spot to take advantage of it. And as far as environmentalists go, of course, protecting the night sky and everything that goes with it is great for the environment. It's great for human health. So I think that there's a lot of commonality built into the advocation for dark skies that both sides of the aisle can appreciate. As a matter of fact, I've been working with several politicians in my area, or from around the state, I should say, that are Republicans who wholeheartedly jumped on board and helped me support in many different ways the dark sky movement in Michigan. As far as the prohibition in the Upper Peninsula, I've never understood that. One thing we did do by working with a state representative out of Sturgis, Michigan, is we got that act changed so that county parks can now be recognized as Michigan Dark Sky Preserves. Previously, that title was reserved for lands owned and managed by the Michigan DNR. But now both the Dr. T.K. Lawless and Headlands Park are now recognized as Michigan Dark Sky Preserves. And I think that in its own way might help our cause. I know that when Beaver Island became a dark sky sanctuary, they had to get the okay from the DNR because they own so much land within that proposed sanctuary, and they had to get them to sign off, and they did. So that's kind of a open door in a certain way where you can say, hey, you did it for Beaver Island. Why can't we do it in the Upper Peninsula? It just doesn't make sense. But that's really all I got to say. I'm a proud graduate of Western Michigan University. I received my bachelor's and master's there in organizational communications. And we are always taught that communication is the glue that holds an organization together. And I hope we can communicate well within our group here and communicate to the general public and educate them that controlling light pollution is a win-win no matter how you look at it. And that's the end of my story for right now. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks so much for being here, Robert. And as you pointed out, the dark sky legislation has changed over the years, and there's no reason it can't change again. So that's what we're going to start talking about in just a few moments. Our last presenter today is Brad Barnett, the Executive Director of Visit Keweenaw. Thanks for being here, Brad.
Hey, thanks, Tom. I appreciate being invited to speak to this panel, and I'll preface my comments with I'm a poor man's replacement for John Muller, who is the owner of the Keweenaw Mountain Lodge, which is the epicenter for, I believe, the first privately organized dark sky park in Michigan and perhaps the United States. If I'm not mistaken, Bob, Tom, Cynthia, you could probably correct me on that spot. So for those of you on the call who are not familiar with the Keweenaw Dark Sky Park, it is located in Copper Harbor, Michigan. To quote Cynthia, we have a Bortle index of a score of about 2 in Copper Harbor as well. So truly dark skies. We benefit by being surrounded by the world's largest freshwater lake, and that's Lake Superior. And then we're also buffered, I should say, by Bob. You said you came from a small town of 1,500. Well, Copper Harbor's year-round population is 160, so significantly smaller than that. So when we talk about being remote, Copper Harbor is the at least within the lower 48, the furthest community from a state interstate highway than any other community in the United States. So again, we have a lot of what we would consider competitive advantages when it comes to knock tourism or astrotourism that we're really proud of. But I'm going to just real quick state, I work for an organization called Visit Keweenaw, and that's a destination marketing organization. So from my perspective, coming to this conversation today, it's really focused on the visitor economy benefits of astrotourism, which we've really leaned into over the past 5 years. The Keweenaw Dark Sky Park was certified by Dark Sky International in June of 2021, right? And so for our neck of the woods, we bring in a lot of people throughout the year for outdoor recreation-based tourism, whether it's the winter, summer, fall, or spring. And so people visiting the Keweenaw is nothing new. However, dark sky tourism was a sort of a novel concept in the region, at least in terms of marketing, promotion, and really leaning into that competitive advantage. So with the establishment of that dark sky park, we have seen a significant increase in the number of visitors coming to our area that are interested in accessing the dark skies. From Copper Harbor, you can easily spot the Milky Way galaxy with the naked eye, which is an incredible experience to behold. Northern Lights enthusiasts certainly have frequented our area as well, and we certainly see dark sky tourism very complementary to the other forms of tourism in the region. In fact, a study by the University of Michigan's Economic Growth Institute, which did a year-round survey in the Western UP in 2023, discovered that it's actually the only economic tourism driver across all 4 seasons that's listed within the top 5 reasons for visiting the Keweenaw Peninsula. So to kind of put that a finer tip on that, people come for skiing or snowmobiling in the wintertime. People come for hiking and waterfalls in the summertime. But across all of these seasons, dark sky viewing, accessing the dark skies is within the top 5 motivating factors for visiting the Keweenaw Peninsula. Mm-hmm. So it truly is a competitive advantage amongst our destination skill sets that we have begun to lean into, and we have seen and experienced over the last several years an increase, not just in terms of visitation, but other businesses leaning into the idea of helping people access the dark skies. Whether it's astro guides, right, where people are taking people out to see the northern lights or to photograph the northern lights, to the development of the UP Dark Sky Festival in Copper Harbor, again led by the Keweenaw Mountain Lodge, it's certainly been a boon for helping encourage people to really connect with nature. And that's what we as a destination do exceptionally well, is helping people access nature. Now, what's interesting is that when my background is actually, I have a PhD from Michigan Technological University in environmental and energy policy. And one way, we try to value things in nature is oftentimes, what do people have to pay in order to experience these things, right? So the farther you drive to a destination, an economist would say, well, that means you value that destination more because you're willing to pay more to get to it or to reach it. We have people coming to the Keweenaw Peninsula just to access our dark skies, literally not just from the Midwest, but across the country, because we are being recognized as a destination for northern lights and, again, access to the dark skies. So an economist would suggest that, again, that has a very high value since people are willing to spend time and money in order to access those things. And that's something really our industry has not done a very good job of, is putting a value on preserving dark skies. And so what I would encourage this group as we have these conversations about what is the value of protecting dark skies, there's truly a monetary value that could be measured, not just in terms of number of jobs or the amount of dollars being spent, but also in terms of, again, the sort of grander sort of model of what's important in terms of preserving our cultural heritage, our natural and beautiful spaces, and of course, the visitor economy in the region. So I'll just kind of cut it there, and I'm looking forward to the discussion moving ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Brad. As you mentioned, the Keweenaw Dark Sky Park being a 4-season tourist attraction is quite a lucrative appeal that perhaps other parts of the Upper Peninsula could benefit from. And we hope that this conversation helps inspire other places to look into the International Dark Sky Park certification. What we're going to discuss now is why a place like Porcupine Mountain State Park, which is very remote, it has old growth forest, north facing beaches on Lake Superior, ideal for northern lights viewing. It has Summit Peak, which is the second highest natural point in Michigan, also ideal for astronomy. And yet it is ineligible to be a dark sky preserve. And so we're going to talk about that a bit now, tease out some of the details on this topic. First, we'll take a short break from speaking, and I'm going to see if I can share this commercial from the Pure Michigan campaign, where they are actively promoting dark sky tourism in Michigan. And this will just kind of highlight how this is an economic driver, as Brad was saying. The full commercial, you can find it later. I'm going to skip through to make it a bit shorter, but this will give you the gist.
When experiencing this level of dark sky, places that are free of artificial light, when people see the billions and billions of stars that we can see, it is just beautiful. It's breathtaking, it's awe-inspiring, and all of those emotions can come about from that.
Well, Dark Sky Park in Michigan is an area of land that has been designated to have low light pollution readings.
One of the things that you look for is areas where there's very little ambient human-created light. The Keweenaw Peninsula is a little spit of land that sticks out into Lake Superior, which is on the Upper Peninsula, with Lake Superior surrounding us and vast wilderness of Canada north of that. It provides a location which is fairly free of artificial light sources.
Here in the city of Alpena, we have 3 dark sky preserves in our general vicinity, and they're on the coast of Lake Huron. So that means that for at least 60 miles across the lake to Canada, there is nothing. There's no light source except if you see a passing freighter ship out there.
Lake Michigan, it's part of the adventure of the headlands. It's part of the appeal of the park. When you walk down the path, your eyes acclimate to the light. And when that happens, just seeing that for the first time is awe-inspiring. The stars, they are stunning.
The stars and meteors and northern lights all stand out just a little bit more because of that lack of artificial light filling in the background.
All right. There you see it, Pure Michigan, talking about how great astrotourism is in Michigan and dark sky preserves, but the commercial does not mention that dark sky preserves are prohibited in the Upper Peninsula. So that's what we're going to talk about now. Oops. Okay, so if you take a look at this map on the right, you'll see all of the dark sky preserves are downstate, even though most people would say that the nights are purest in the Upper Peninsula in most areas. So that seems a bit contradictory. I found that curious. You know, I first visited the Keweenaw Dark Sky Lodge for an amazing meteor shower a couple years ago. And I was thinking that Porcupine Mountain State Park would be a great candidate to be a dark sky park. If the Porkies were any kind of dark sky certification, it would encourage new operations in the area to adopt downward facing lights and for just any industry to be more considerate about what lighting it was using. However, when our campaign reached out to the Michigan DNR to ask about making specifically the Presque Isle scenic area a dark sky park, this is the response we received from Douglas Rich, who is the district supervisor of the Parks and Recreation Division. We understand your concern, but the Michigan Department of Natural Resources must follow the state statute. Specifically, a dark sky preserve shall not be established in the Upper Peninsula. So here is really the subtlety here. The Keweenaw Dark Sky Park can exist because it went through an international dark sky certification through the independent group that Robyn and Robert have worked with and Robyn works with. Whereas a state park like the Porkies or any state lands, although they might not be legally prohibited from applying for that international certification, they would certainly feel like they're going, you know, behind the back of the state statute, and therefore they feel compelled to work through the state statute, which prohibits the dark sky preserve. Let's look exactly at what the bill says. This is an amendment to a 1994 piece of legislature. However, the amendment itself dates from February 21st, 2012. This is when it was introduced into the Michigan House. And it simply defines what is a dark sky preserve. Lighting shall be directed downward. Whenever possible, lighting shall be provided by fully shielded fixtures. Wherever practical and appropriate, outdoor lighting fixtures shall be motion sensor fixtures and not fixtures that remain lighted during all hours of darkness. And then the bill proceeds to list several dark sky preserves to be established in Michigan. So it seems fairly uncontroversial. That was February 12th. That was passed in the House April 24th, 2012. But then come June 14th in the Senate, this is what the Senate approved. They added this clause: notwithstanding any other provision of this part, a dark sky preserve shall not be established in the Upper Peninsula. So that raises the question, what happened between April 24th in the House and June 14th in the Senate? What conversations took place to inspire this clause? Well, one clue, this final piece was also added in the Senate at the same time. Notwithstanding any other provision of this part, the use and development of land within a dark sky preserve, including the use of land for motorized and non-motorized recreation, shall not be restricted due to the designation as a dark sky preserve. So it seems like we're seeing here just a larger concern about dark sky preserves being prohibitive to overall development in the region. Before we launch into the discussion, I would encourage folks to go to the petition, change.org/therightTonight. As soon as you sign, you will receive updates about our progress in this campaign. And then go to protecttheporkies.com, other initiatives, the Right Tonight. You'll find the replay of this video posted tomorrow. And you'll also find a link to paper petitions. Okay, so with that, we're going to go into the discussion period, which should be interesting. And I just want to start with a question, an open question. What are people's general reactions to the prohibition on UP dark sky preserves? Why was it enacted, and what can we do about it? And I'll pass the ball to Aimee to get the conversation started on this one, but folks should feel free to chime in. And if people in the audience would like to post questions in the chat, we can bring those into the discussion as well. You're muted, Aimee.
I had chat up and the space bar wasn't working to do that. Okay, yeah, so how do I feel? Well, I don't know. It was so shocking when you sent, I saw it on your newsletter. It's the first I heard with Protect the Porkies, that we had actually been prohibited, that we, as the people who live here in the UP, and one of the things I think country people, those of us who live up here, either we moved up here because we like the place or we lived here and have always lived here. What we love about it is you can have night sky, you get people over, or you just go out on your porch and you can see the northern lights, you can see the Milky Way, you can see all of this. So I was born like in the Upper Peninsula and lived all my life, mostly rural, up in the northern Great Lakes area here in northern Wisconsin and all that. And I've been seeing year after year more and more light pollution. Where I live right now, I'm about maybe 30 minutes south of Marquette, and for years, I have not been able to see the northern lights until recently when they really went. Because every time you looked north, you saw Marquette's, light hitting the sky there. So I would have loved to be able to protect our dark skies up here in the Upper Peninsula. And then when I saw that this was actually prohibiting it, I felt it was just downstate going all over again, deciding that we up here in the UP don't have a right to protect our area. We've also, as many of you I'm sure are aware, have been considered a resource colony for downstate and out of state and out of country industries. So when I heard this, I really thought, wow, that sounds to me, especially coming around 2012 with the whole Eagle mine and everything that was going in at that time, and this whole vision for a whole new mining district with the so-called green energy economy. It seemed to me that it was kind of a way of keeping the possibility of massive industrial development here in the UP still open as a possibility. And I don't know what happened, like you said, Tom, what happened in that between April and June, and also know who happened. And I looked up it was in 2012 that Tom Casperson was our state senator at that time. So I don't know what he spoke up for, or if he spoke against this. I highly doubt he spoke against it, because he also talked about wanting to develop US 41 into an industrial corridor. So yeah, this really upset me a lot. And I suspect it has everything to do with trying to keep us in the vein of industrial development rather than and excluding us from the Pure Michigan campaign sort of stuff, the dark sky tourism, which is we are just key and absolutely ideal for. So yeah, it upset me a lot. And I think there's more afoot than just there's something happening. I'd like to kind of see where that came from.
Thanks, Aimee. Any other thoughts? Kathleen, I see you posting some things in the chat there. Do you care to elaborate?
Yeah, I wonder who inserted the revision into that, bill. It does seem very suspicious, but I'm thinking that probably there is a record of who actually did it. It's hard to go back and find things this far out, but there are versions of the bills that are produced that are posted when these things are under consideration. And I wonder whether we might be able to actually just know who did it. I mean, if it was somebody in the UP that's still involved in things, that's somebody who's needs to be, convinced that dark sky parks are a great thing for the Upper Peninsula. If it was someone downstate or a red herring, maybe I was thinking that somebody at Michigan Environmental Council might be able to do that kind of policy research and just go back and pull the file on that one and see who was advocating for the amendment.
Yeah, this could be a great research project for somebody, maybe a student that's listening right now.
I agree with George's comment there too about the guarding against preventing vehicles, because vehicle you know, access of vehicle lighting, like, that's a big thing. I really can only guess, you know, looking back to 2012, what, what was happening. It's suspicious though.
Yeah, Cynthia, go ahead.
Actually, I did a little bit of research. I read in Tyler through that bill and through the amendments. I originally looked at it 5 years ago when we started completing our application. And of course, in relation to us, my first question was, is Beaver Island part of the Upper Peninsula or the Lower Peninsula? Which a lot of people can't answer that either. But Frank Foster, who coincidentally in 2012 was, I'm trying to find my notes here, which of course I can't. I have too many windows open. If you go look into Frank Foster, he was the head of one of the committees for tourism. So which made no sense. And I found him working for a public awareness advocate. I can put this into the chat. I can't talk and do these things at the same time. But he was the head of Michigan State Tourism Committee at the time. He now works as a public awareness. I sent him a letter. I hope you don't mind the liberty, taking that liberty, and ask him a question about why. So that's the guy whose name was on the amendment in 2012. And coincidentally or incidentally, everything that the state of Michigan is trying to do and Pure Michigan right now goes against that prohibition. As I said in some of my notes, you know, the language really needs to be addressed here. What does preserve mean? Has nothing to do with the designation from IDA. I was glad to see that letter, Tom. Not glad to see that letter, but that answer, I don't think that's the end answer. And if you talk to Robert Parrish has done a lot of legislative work in the House and Senate to get done what he's got done, and he's familiar with this process. Just getting past the language has been a big hurdle. And bottom line, what we found out and what we were able to communicate to the DNR is that this designation as a sanctuary has very little effect on DNR parks. I'm also surprised by that. One of the reasons I think they did it and is because of the language, their own state of Michigan language. That kind of language was unheard of in prior years, and it's still it's still unheard of, and it's difficult to get language into your own Michigan state local master plan, development plan, biodiversity plan. A lot of those plans still don't contain any kind of language. So, Frank
Thank you,
Foster,
Cynthia.
you are welcome.
Frank Foster, we'll follow up on that. Robert, you've got your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be as hard of a task as people are assuming to get that language removed from Act 451. Like I've said, I've worked with more than a few state senators and representatives who were Republicans in the state that wholeheartedly approved any positive movement to the dark skies. For years and years and years, Michigan's one of Michigan's top industries has always been tourism. And with astrotourism on the rise, that gives us a wonderful platform to sell to these politicians if they view themselves as capitalists versus environmentalists. Like I said before, dark skies offer something positive for everybody. It's a win-win, whether you're trying to save money, you're trying to protect the environment, trying to protect your own health, trying to protect the night sky. It's all a win-win. One example that I use through our efforts at Lawless Park is that when we switched over from incandescent outdoor lighting to LED, IDA approved lighting, or I should say Dark Sky International, I'm using the old acronym, we did the math based on what we were paying per kilowatt hour. And we found that each fixture in our park was going to save us around $89 per year in energy costs. And that's savings to the taxpayers. And so we replaced, I think, a total of 12 lights. And they're either on timers or they're on motion detectors too. So we're saving even more than that $89, but we just did it straight so many hours per night. Of course, there's more darkness this time of year than there is in the summer. But anyway, we averaged everything together. We came up with a figure of saving $89 per year per fixture. And so in 3 years' time, we're going to get a money back on our investment. And we're doing everything right as far as dark sky goes, and still providing light for those who need it in particular situations. So it's a win-win.
It is a win-win. Thanks a lot, Robert. We've got Brad Barnett with his hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, let me put my hand down. The one thing I'd like to introduce in this conversation is this concept of competition. And Robert, I fully support the idea that the industry is exceptionally collaborative and mutually supporting. But I would posit, you know, the Keweenaw Dark Sky Park is literally the only dark sky park in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. That's a competitive advantage from a tourism perspective, right? If I am someone who represents a niche industry and I can discontinue or disallow the proliferation of competitive assets, that's an advantage. And so just in terms of thinking about because we like to think of ourselves as one homogenous state, but we know that our state is made up of many communities. And, so in the spirit of competition, one theory I would posit for the reason or the rationale for disallowing dark sky parks in the Upper Peninsula is to diminish competition. And so that might be something as this group explores some of the rationale as to why that barrier was put into place. Well, it does benefit the communities that benefit from dark sky preserves downstate from an economic and competitive standpoint. So just be aware of that potentially moving forward.
That's a very interesting point. Thanks. Aimee, go for it.
Yeah, I think those are all interesting points to bring up, but I do think too it's really important to remember that we've not only have the mine, we've had the space industry taking a look at doing the rocket launching here. I know sometime within the last 10 years, Munising has launched a huge industrial development park, which lights up the sky over there incredibly. So I think I can understand the competition issues and that sort of thing, but I do think we need to really keep in mind that we are considered up here part of the factory floor for the nation, and that something like this would be very effective in preventing industrial development, or protecting dark skies would be something that would be very effective in helping to kind of push back against industrial development. So I think we just I think we need to keep that possibility in mind, because that's who we have been, and we have so many industries looking up here. And so as we do that, I'm hoping it's going to be as easy as everybody is thinking it might be just to write, but I suspect we're going to run into resistance because there are deeper agendas that have been going on for a long time here in the UP, and not really just theories. They actually exist. They are there. And just kind of bring that back again, and remembering the space industry itself, and who knows where we're going to be going from there with that.
Yeah, thank you, Aimee. We have a question from the chat from Brian. He says, what would lifting the ban be able to achieve for the Porcupine Mountains? So if the Porcupine Mountains, for example, was a dark sky preserve, what would it actually achieve? And my thinking on this is that if you make a state park a dark sky preserve, or any state lands, and then you have some astrotourism that develops, it isn't necessarily anything that is being enforced on the surrounding lands, but it's creating the awareness that the dark skies are something to be protected, something to be celebrated and appreciated. And then any new development projects that are proposed in the vicinity of that dark sky preserve, they'll have to be more considerate about what kind of lighting they use and what impact that it will have. So just for example, making the Porkies a dark sky preserve would not prohibit any industrial operations from taking place around the Porkies, but it would potentially incentivize them to be more considerate about their lighting or face a lot of community pushback. So I hope that answers the question there. So Cynthia, I see you got your hand up. You want to make it quick, and then we'll do another question as well.
I'll make it real quick. One of the things that we said over and over again to ourselves in 5 years of agony trying to get this application approved. It's not that easy, first of all, to get it done, but was that we're doing it and you can do it. And anybody in that area, protect the Porkies, you can get the petitions out. You can have the Dark Sky Week proclamation. You can have your groups have events in Dark Sky Week. And you're going to need all that anyway if you want to become any kind of dark sky place. And what you get is the world looking at you. The world recognizes Beaver Island now. I talk to people all over the world. Robert Parrish, Robyn Porteen, those advocates. You can become an advocate personally. You can become a member. You can join all of their assets and use all of that. And you can make it happen tonight, tomorrow, and next week. And you can be a dark sky place with or without state approval or the label of Dark Sky Preserve.
Preach it, Cynthia, preach it.
Yeah,
You can
mic
do it.
drop. All right, well, let's go on. That was excellent, Cynthia. So let's introduce another question here. So just thinking about why this prohibition might have been implemented, one of the theories that's been raised is that developers and those who represent them in government fear that this would somehow be a hindrance to the advancement of industry and the expanse of urban populations, et cetera. So let's kind of address that point. Would protecting dark skies hinder economic growth? And I'll shoot this one over to Brad Barnett. What are your thoughts? Do dark skies prohibit economic growth?
I think the clear answer is it doesn't, especially with the adaptation of different lighting technology that's available at this day and age. There's no question that most industries, any form of regulatory prohibition is usually met with distaste by the industry that's being regulated. And so generally speaking, this concept of additional burdensome regulation or additional costs come into play. But there's not really a lot of evidence that that suggests that lighting shields restrict economic growth or community development, and we see that not just here in Michigan, but across the country. And there are countless examples in other parts of the country in which cities at a city scale have implemented these directives and done so successfully and have seen benefits therein. So I think it's a fairly baseless claim based on a slightly outdated model of growth and development. And what's being discounted, of course, is the yin to the yang, of course, right? So the opportunity for additional visitation based on astrotourism, and then also too the idea that you have people who are legitimately moving to communities which have better access to nature, better access to dark skies, and so that loss of economic activity, because you're discounting that as a community benefit, is also something that has to be taken into account in terms of the overall value proposition for dark sky compliance and regulation.
Yeah, very much so. I know I read recently in a report called the Powers Report, which was contracted by the Friends of the Land of Keweenaw organization back in 2013. And it stated that a large amount of the wealth in the Upper Peninsula actually comes from people retiring here and being paid through their pensions. So they're not necessarily working, but they're retiring here because it's a nice place to live. Mm-hmm. And then increasingly, we're also having folks come in from other parts of the country. I would include myself in this category, specifically looking for what the rest of the Midwest has lost. I'm from Kansas City originally, where we've got concrete and cornfields and quite a lot of light pollution. And I came up to the Upper Peninsula just wanting to have a good view of our universal human heritage, which is the night sky. So opening up dark sky preserves and in general just celebrating astrotourism more, I think would further the narrative that the UP is a nice place to settle down and to have access to outdoor recreation areas. And Aimee in the chat has mentioned that it's promoting industry which is sustainable rather than industry which is boom and bust. Aimee, would you like to elaborate on that point at all?
I think I probably said all, but just the idea. I come from, like I said, I was born in the UP and I've lived the last 20 some years here, but I grew up in northern Wisconsin, which is a tourist economy. And there's such a vast difference, I think, in incomes, just people who are living there. There's such a vast difference in how people feel about their land, and the communities. There's a real, it's not that tourism doesn't have its problems, but it is a long-term thing. It helps people from all across the spectrum come together. They love that land. They feel invested in protecting that land. And because it's not just something for now, you dig it out or you cut it down and you send it off. It's that land is there and it's going to keep on being there for this generation, for the next generation, the next generation. And it's not even just tourism. It's, things like maple sugar production or maple syrup production, or learning, a whole new economy of people who are very interested in learning how do you live from and with the land, what are the wild edibles that are out there that can really just kind of dovetail into a back to the land, get back to our real rural roots and move on into a sustainable future. Kind of all comes together in this protection of things like the dark skies, which lead to protecting our land and leading to a whole new type of economy. So yeah, I guess I did want to elaborate.
Thank you. So I'm wondering what is some other pushback that we might receive when we try to build the movement to overturn this legislation? One of the comments that I have heard from folks in the Upper Peninsula is that there is this concern of too much tourism coming in. Would dark sky preserves just bring in flocks of astronomy clubs wielding telescopes, which would then, trample the native ecosystem and cause traffic jams? Do we think over tourism is a problem here, or is it maybe a bit alarmist? I don't know. What are our general thoughts on the potentials of astrotourism to negatively affect the area? Is that even a possibility?
But I'll jump in first. Maybe you have someone who you have designated to speak to this, but I feel best equipped to kind of tackle this. One, astrotourism is exceptionally complementary to the principles of sustainable tourism, right? We tend to see a different classification of visitor coming to the region who focuses more so on learning, educational experiences, the opportunity to quietly connect with nature versus dominate nature. To me, the idea that this is somehow an invasive form of tourism is misleading at best. Don't get me wrong, right? There are people who want to see the dark skies and the northern lights, and they will sit with their car lights turned on as they're looking outside, waiting for the northern lights to come out. So there's some educational opportunities that certainly need to happen. However, the idea that it drives mass tourism in abundance, it's actually counterintuitive, because at the end of the day, it's, experiencing the dark skies. While it can be a social experience, oftentimes we see that the preference is in lower volumes and lower numbers. So I don't know what other dark sky parks have seen where they see higher volumes, but at least in the Keweenaw Peninsula, we haven't seen large congregations of individuals coming to our region specifically for dark sky tourism. And again, it tends to be complementary. It's something that helps add to the experience, not something that actually just serves as a magnet to attract even more mass tourism to the region.
Right. I think, of course, any tourism is going to have impacts. There's anytime you got a lot of people coming, there's going to be impacts. But in general, it seems like a form of tourism which will encourage us to address light pollution, which until now has really been left out of the environmental mainstream conversation. It's really now just that people are sort of becoming aware of light pollution on a wide scale. I think the benefits of having astrotourism vastly outweigh any harms from a handful of people, driving their cars and walking around in places that they weren't walking previously. I think the benefits from encouraging us all to turn down the lights and encouraging communities to turn down the lights. Like I stated earlier, I think the conversation about dark sky preserves in the Upper Peninsula, hopefully it can be part of a larger conversation about dark sky awareness that might lead to some other citywide measures in Marquette and in Houghton and in Ironwood, in these big areas where light pollution is spilling out and spreading for many dozens of miles. Yeah, Robert, go for it.
Okay. Speaking on behalf of Dr. Lawless Dark Sky Park, we have seen an influx or a increase in tourism, astrotourism into Cass County, which is mainly a very rural farmland type of community. We have very little industry in our county, and it's always fascinating to me because the majority of people who come to our park are either from the Chicagoland area or the Metro Detroit area or Grand Rapids area. And invariably, they always say the same thing. Boy, I wish we had these kind of stars back home. Well, you do. You just can't see them. And but our experience as far as tourism is the type of people we bring into the park don't necessarily fit in the square peg of the average tourist. These people are environmentally conscious. They're very aware of the what's the word? How you should act within a dark sky park, and very appreciative of how it affects the environment. So I'm just speaking for myself. I don't have any quantitative facts to prove what I'm saying, but I think tourism is a good thing, especially in Michigan, and it's helped out our park tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So moving on here to another question. This was kind of touched on previously. Is this campaign, which we are discussing, is the idea of protecting night skies in the Upper Peninsula and ending the prohibition on dark sky preserves, is this a Democrat or a Republican issue? Shouldn't protecting the quality of our nights be bipartisan, or better yet, nonpartisan? And I'm going to toss this one over to Robyn, who we haven't heard from in a bit. What do you think, Robyn? Is protecting the night skies a political issue?
I don't believe so. I come up in rural Lower Peninsula, Michigan, and almost everybody that I deal with on conservation are all on the right side of the aisle. So I think it just depends on where you live, and I think it's a great opportunity to be bipartisan. I think both sides care about our night sky. I really do.
Thank you, Robyn. Any other thoughts on that one? I think there's not much more to say. I think we all agree this should be a no-brainer.
I would add that as a whole, I would say Michiganders are very aware of the state that they live in. It's a very beautiful state. We have everything that you can think of here in Michigan. And I think that goes a long way, no matter what side of the aisle you're standing on politically, to prove that Michiganders do have this deep feeling of protecting the environment and protecting the beauty of Michigan. So that's one of the reasons I think politically, yeah, there are plenty of differences in this day and age, but this is something we can all stand on together. It's a common ground type of thing.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, well, while we've still got a bit of steam left, I want to make sure we address this question, which is, where do we go from here? So we've had the conversation, we've had our first Zoom meeting, there's a virtual petition out there, and we've got some printable petitions available. But what are the next steps in overturning this legislation? And we'll toss this over to Aimee to start the conversation.
I think there's a lot of other people that might have better specifics in terms of how to overturn legislation. But from my point, I would think as we're doing this, as the petition is a great kind of central organizing tool too. I think looking even beyond the broader idea of protecting dark skies, even as working to overturn this legislation, would be to kind of really bring our communities together, because I do think this has such a potential to make some really great healing between our communities here in the Upper Peninsula. But I think needing to, when we are in the UP, particularly in the central UP with Marquette, and it's such a urban area, and the rural areas, there's like this real kind of identity divide, and people divide up into between the two camps, and trying to figure out how we can make sure to bridge that. So trying to speak the language of the different places to pull people together, so this doesn't become like a blue-green thing versus a red thing, right? That it becomes, we are all in this together. We all want to love and protect these guys. So having tailgate parties, you know, to do stargazing and have petition there. I really think community organizing, bringing people together, maybe book clubs. Dark Sky International has a really great book that they did a book club on. It doesn't show. It's called Night Magic, and it starts in spring and goes through fall, and having people come together and just talk about the wonders that night can bring out. I'm learning so much stuff just by reading it. So I would say for myself, as we're working towards this legislation, and like I said, other people can speak better to the specifics on how to do that. I think pulling communities together for this legislation to overturn it, and also just to protect our skies in general, would be absolutely key and important.
Yeah, very much so. And that's where the paper petitions will really come in handy. If folks in the UP are going to host one of those tailgate parties or a reading group or a meteor shower party, print off a whole bunch of those paper petitions, hand them out to the folks present, and then everybody collects signatures from friends and family and brings them to other events, and you can mail them to the address which is on that petition. And petitions sometimes get overlooked. They seem like they're purely symbolic, but when we're communicating with lawmakers later, they really like to have things quantified for them. They really like to know how many people are passionate about this, because that ultimately converts into votes at the end of the day. So please circulate both of those petitions as much as possible. Cynthia, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one of the things you're going to have to do anyway to become a dark sky place, or even start thinking about it, is to get letters of support from the community, from businesses, from senators, legislators, any group and organization that will write a letter of support for your effort. And then you've already got them in hand, and those can go along with the petition. And by the way, the author of that book was this year's keynote speaker at Under One Sky for Dark Sky International, Aimee.
Excellent.
That's where I heard from her, more about her.
Yeah, that point about letters of support from local organizations is a great idea, and anybody here should feel free. This is not, we're not an organization that's taking care of this. This is a decentralized campaign. Everybody's a part of it. So we fully encourage people just to take the liberty to act on your own behalf and to organize with others in your community there. Any other thoughts on where we go from here? Not just in how do we talk to the legislators, but in building that grassroots movement.
I just wanted to say, this is Kathleen. Tom made a really great point there that I think we're very used to these, initiatives or projects being spearheaded by a particular group that's going to handle it all. And there is no group. It is us. And so if anybody cares about this, you are the group. And I feel like increasingly that is the model that works the best. And, it is up to all of us to advocate for this. And you've already put together an amazing petition, and, you've done a lot already, Tom. I really appreciate what you've pulled together for tonight. And but I know your plate is already full with a lot of things. So this is just one aspect of the work you do. And I just wanted to spotlight that comment, because it's really important. People have the ability to take this and run with it in their own ways.
Exactly. Thank you for emphasizing that, Kathleen. We have one interesting comment here from Eric Hansen. He mentions Flagstaff as an example of how light pollution can easily be remedied. Even in a city, Flagstaff, Arizona is 75,000 in population, and they can see the Milky Way from within the city. So anytime the argument is brought up that protecting dark sky is somehow going to hinder economic development or urban development, just tell people about Flagstaff, Arizona. 75,000 is a few times larger than Marquette, the UP's biggest city. So if Flagstaff can do it, then anywhere else can as well. Yeah, Robyn.
Well, the last question we were going to have was about light pollution. I do have a photo of Flagstaff up on my
Oh, great.
screen. If
Please.
I can share.
Yes, please do.
Okay. Okay, so you can see that Flagstaff was designated as the world's first international dark sky community by the International Dark Sky Association in 2001. They capped all their lights. Before they did this, they were a glowing mess. But capping all their lights, you can see the Milky Way over the city. It's a beautiful example of what can be done. So things like big developments, maybe that mine, if it gets put in, I think it's important to be at the table in the beginning, because if we can control the lighting, you know, if they do put that mine in or any other big development in the UP, at least that's better than you know, them lighting up the sky when they don't need to. And light pollution, you know, it is reversible. It's one of the only pollutions that's very easily reversible. So you know, I've got samples of lighting here that, you know, people might not realize all it takes is to cap your lights. Here's an example of a resort. You know, they turned all their lights on, then they dimmed them down and capped them. It's even better. Then they eliminated some lights and put only 3 up, even better. Then they turned them right off and you've got your natural night sky back. And then, because I was going to answer that last question, if you just want to know what you can do at your own home, you can use warmer lights and motion detectors, you know, to light your own property. When you walk out the door on that top picture there with that bright light, you're going to be blinded when you walk out. You're not going to be able to see who's out there. But if you have that nice incandescent glow, it'll keep your night vision intact. And then if you're gonna, if you want to get involved in your community, or you have a dispute with a neighbor that's got a bright light, if you got a new gas station going in and it's pretty bad, you know, you can talk with your township, see if there's a lighting ordinance. You can talk with your neighbors, but always make sure that first contact is a positive one, because you're going to set the ground for a big disputes. I mean, we get people, residents contacting us all the time. Their neighbors are turning the lights on and pointing them at their houses because they've been in arguments over the lighting. So it's all in how you approach that, even your township. I've got a volunteer that lives up near Whitefish Point, and she came into her township all upset over lighting in that area, and now they won't even let her come back in. So it's important on how you know, you approach it with a positive conversation. So that's all I got. Let me get out.
Yeah, thank you so much for those points, Robyn. And it is very encouraging to think that light pollution is completely and very quickly reversible, because so many environmental issues are very complex and seem like they're going to take decades to reverse. Light pollution, we could totally revolutionize how the world worked if we just had the political will to do it and changed our lighting. So let's hear from Robert, and then Aimee, and then Kathleen.
Okay. Is this like my sign off, or?
Yeah, we'll probably wind down yeah, in the next 9 or 10 minutes, but doesn't need to be a sign off necessarily.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've been working on is, as many people know, Governor Whitmer has this green energy initiative that she wants to see enacted in Michigan, pretty much 100% renewable energy by a certain date, which escapes me. But I think promoting dark skies is a great way to fit into that initiative, because you'll be saving energy and at the same time protecting the environment. What could be more green than that? And one thing that I'm pushing this year, as you know, Michigan has a plethora of different custom license plates that you can have. For instance, mine supports lighthouses here in Michigan, but I'm trying to get traction on two different things. Number one, having the Michigan building code changed to reflect the dark sky initiative of fully shielded lights, preferably 2700 Kelvin or less. And also I'm pushing for a dark sky Michigan license plate. And I think that would go a long way of bringing attention to our argument or our point of view. Great way to start up a conversation. But I will just tell everybody out there, sometimes fighting light pollution feels like I'm pushing a rope uphill. I'm always, the one pushback I always get is, what about crime? What about crime? But there is no real empirical evidence that shows that crime increases at nighttime versus daytime. As a matter of fact, the majority of violent crime happens during the day. The one example I use here in my neighborhood, the guy who lives across the street from me has his garage lit up like a penitentiary at night because he has a beautiful hot rod in this garage. And I mean, this car is beautiful. And being a man, when he cruises up and down the street, I go, you can almost smell the testosterone coming off of that car as it passes by. But I approached him one time and said, hey, buddy, can you turn down your lights at night? Because my wife has had to put up a dark sky or blackout curtains in our bedroom just so we can go to sleep at night. And he says, no, I really don't want to do that because of my hot rod in the garage. I want it protected. And I asked him, I said, would you stay up all night looking out the window at your garage? No, of course not. I got to get up and go to work in the morning. Well, how would you know if anybody's there in the first place? Matter of fact, what you're doing him a favor because he doesn't even have to carry a flashlight now. He's got all the light he needs to fulfill any nefarious activities he has in mind. But that's the number one pushback I always get is crime. And people are afraid of the dark. But we're not asking them to get rid of their lights. We're just asking them to be intelligent with their lights. And that's where the education part comes in. It's pushing 9 o'clock. I'm just getting over influenza A, and I'm pretty much toast right about now. So I'm going to say good night. Once again, thank you for the opportunity for being part of this. I'll do whatever I can to advance the program. And everybody have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. And yeah, we can slowly start winding down. We're not on any strict schedule here, but I know 2 hours is pushing it for a Zoom call. So yeah, Aimee, and let's hear from Kathleen after that.
I was just wondering, is there a central hub for people to be communicating what they're doing or to stay in touch after this or anything of that nature?
Right. So ideally, we would have our own website, which might happen eventually. For now, the best thing to do would be for everybody to sign that virtual petition, because then, at least for now, until we get another hub set up, that allows us to send emails to everybody who signed and keep everybody up to date on what our next steps will be. And so that, yeah, the right to night, change.org/the right to night. I'm trying to type and speak at the same time. That's in the chat there.
Would it be presumptuous to say I just made a real quick Facebook group for anybody who wants to join?
Not presumptuous at all. That's excellent. Yeah. How can we find it?
Nothing on it. No picture. There's nothing. I just literally just so we can stay in touch. And Tom, I'll put you on as admin and whatever. But everybody, whoever wants to be, but just thought it'd be a great chance for everybody who's here and interested to stay in touch.
Yes. Get in while it's underground, and then you can say you were one of the first ones, folks. So that link is in the chat. Everybody can join the group now. Thanks for doing that, Aimee.
Absolutely.
Kathleen, I think you had your hand up earlier. Is that hand gone, or is
Yeah.
there something you'd like to say?
I gotta head out too, but thank you so much, Aimee. That was great. Throwing together a little group. Everybody signed the petition, and then you have the list too. And also, I just appreciated the last point that was made about what are the arguments that we will come up against? Crime/safety is a big one that gets mentioned, and I just wanted to share anecdotally about that. I grew up on a farm, and dusk till dawn lights was a thing, in the yard of every farm. There's this enormous sodium light that is, look brightening the sky around every farm. And I don't know exactly when this started, but what I have learned is that it was not initiated for the most part by the farmers. It was something that was installed by the electric companies. And increasingly, as these burn out, electric companies are contacting people about how they want to replace these high, wattage, expensive bulbs. And a lot of times the old sodium lights are not shielded. They're beaming up as much as they're beaming down. They're beaming in your farmhouse windows as much as they're illuminating your yard. And they're replacing them with down-facing LEDs that are much lower wattage and shielded on top, which is a good thing. I still think that a lot of the arguments about safety are not taking into consideration the full range of protecting human safety, because one of the big aspects of the nighttime light pollution is the impact on human health that kind of gets overlooked. And so the impact on human health, I missed the very beginning of this forum because I was in a public hearing, but forgive me if this was already discussed, but the light pollution is documented as a major disruptor of human sleep, which has a huge number of human health impacts. You are not aware of the human health impact, but that is you're waking up multiple times a night, slightly. That disrupts your dream cycle. That disrupts, how your brain is flushing out contaminants and cleaning itself overnight. Like these are serious. They impact our blood pressure, our overall health and well-being. And also, a lot of researchers are looking at the wildlife impacts. So we think, a lot about human safety and human health, but we need to also look at the other things that make the UP special, and that has to do with, our wildlife, our ecosystems, and the, insects are attracted to lights and die around lights. There's a lot of research showing exactly how it happens, but they just circle it often until they literally fall with exhaustion. And then that makes a lot more mess for people. So turning off the lights on your porch ends up being, you have less spider webs, you have less dead insects to clean up. But also it's impacting species that we don't even have an awareness of for the most part, like how birds are migrating at night and being attracted to urban light areas, or how, night breeding populations of frogs and toads and bats, how they are interacting with lights at night in contaminated areas where the sky is contaminated with light. There are a lot of impacts. They're finding it with mammals as well. A lot of creatures are busy in the night doing things that we're not aware of, and it's impacting those ecosystems as much as it's impacting our ability to see the night sky. So anyway, I would always urge us to redefine what safety means. I think a lot of times when we say we have to have lights on for safety, it's just narrowly considering a small aspect of human safety, and it's not enough. So anyway, thank you, Tom and everyone. Great job tonight, and I'm gonna head off. But thanks a
Yeah.
lot for the conversation.
Thank you for being here, Kathleen. And just to flip it around, one hand is redefining safety, the other hand is redefining crime. It's recognized that it's a crime to trespass on private property, right? But the technical definition of when the street light comes into your window is light trespass.
Yeah, that is
So
great. That is a great
you
point.
could consider that light pollution is already a crime that needs to be corrected.
That's great. That is a great correction. Yes.
Cynthia, you've got your hand up there, and maybe we'll start winding down if you want to also say your farewells.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathleen. Kathleen's speech shows you clearly, which I could do too, and other people in the room. There's so much. She has a wealth of knowledge, and there's so much out there so how to compact it down and how to get it in one little ball of wax to get to people. Just 4 quick things. Number 1, when Dark Sky International, the Caribbean segment this year, from the Caribbean, and the head of the Dark Skies over there, the Caribbean is the murder capital of the world and also holds the distinguishment of being the most light polluted place in the world. Okay, that's my quick pat answer. Look to the Caribbean, however you want to pronounce it. Murder capital of the world, most light polluted. If we could get dark skies to be a natural resource, then all the armor is out there to protect that. It's the big umbrella. Rob and I have talked about this. It's an umbrella over all, under one sky. And my question for Aimee, just one more of the 2 things in there. Next year's Under One Sky conference is going to focus, as it did this year, biodiversity and wildlife and cultural concerns, how to really, which there's a big part of that out there already, but, and we have a stone circle here on Beaver Island, very interested in working with the Native Americans, any group, to work on the cultural aspects. Coincidentally, part of Bill 451 is to protect architectural, indigenous, cultural artifacts in the area. Keep scrolling down on that 451. It gets real interesting. One more crazy thing that I'm known for. If light pollution is harming animals, insects, birds, all these things, what's it doing to your reproductive life? What's it doing to your sex life? That kind of wakes people up too. What's it doing to you? A lot. And lastly, have you contacted an advocate? Because even though you may not be going for a dark sky place designation right now, I think you can still contact Dark Sky International and a dark sky advocate for help with this. Other than that, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be a part of this. I'd be happy to help anybody because I am also a official Dark Sky International advocate with any part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And we all love your passion on this topic. It's great to have you in our ranks.
Well, then turn off the lights. You're killing my passion.
Exactly. So Brad, let's hear from you. Any closing thoughts on just the whole conversation and where we go from here?
Well, no, I think this was a productive conversation, Tom, and I appreciate you organizing this exceptionally knowledgeable group around the topic. I would just encourage those of you who are and continue to be involved in this conversation. Clearly, there's a legislative route to potentially pursue when it comes to advancing goals, but the idea of tackling light pollution doesn't inherently start or end with legislative activities. The opportunities to engage the business community from an energy efficiency standpoint, from again a quality of life perspective, there are gains to be made. Even outside of the legislative push. So that's what's fantastic about dark sky preservation as a sort of as a market resource, is that we can all participate in helping improve that asset. But a lot of times it comes down to education, persistence, and again, tackling some of those perceived barriers. And I intentionally use the word perceived, just as you've articulated the issues related to safety. Well, safety isn't always crime related, right? I mean, so safety could also mean just not falling somewhere or not stepping on something you don't need to step on, right? So how do we do that from a technical perspective? Mitigating some of those concerns, I think, goes a long way. We've seen that in the Keweenaw Peninsula, where businesses have actually embraced the idea how, you know, dark sky preservation can be good for business. Our local ski hill, Mount Bohemia, you know, they still have some of those big lights, but guess what they're doing now is dark sky hikes. You know, using their chairlifts to take people up to the top of Mount Bohemia and then leading them on snowshoe hikes. So just highlighting these opportunities, right, will help incentivize businesses to embrace these things through incentives, and, you know, if and when the legislative pathway doesn't present itself in a timely fashion. So thanks and have a great night.
Thank you so much for being here, Brad. And we especially appreciate your economic contributions, because that's got to be a big part of this conversation, so that folks realize that this will not be an economic hindrance, but actually of benefit to the UP's economy. All right, any closing words from you, Aimee?
Other than to say, personally, I am so excited. This has been a really empowering and inspiring panel. For years, I've wanted to get involved with a group on dark skies, and I just see this coalescing here. I love it. And on the big picture, I think dark skies are one of our most important things. Maybe on the surface level, it might seem esoteric to some people, but as everybody's pointing out, there's so many things that go into this with the planet. But I think also we're in an era where we're in real danger of losing things like our wild moon, right? The fact that we can look up at the moon and still see it as a wild place. And we're actually at a point where that could become threatened and endangered. So to have all these people coming together who care about this is just, I think, really exciting. I just appreciate everybody, all the information and input everybody's been giving here. So miigwech, thanks for all of that. And we're bringing back our human heritage, keeping it, protecting it.
Yes, we are. Well, thank you, Aimee. Thank you, Brad, Cynthia, and all of our other panelists and everybody in the audience for being here. Be sure to follow along on that Facebook group and to sign the petition. We're going to keep this ball rolling. We're going to build momentum. It's going to be awesome. It's great to have everybody a part of it. I'm going to go ahead and blow out the candle here. Whoa, that shot wax everywhere unexpectedly. But that will that will be the symbolic close to tonight's meeting. So keep in touch and stay dark.